co-founder and Strategic Alliances Director at Midvision. He works as part of the management team at Midvision, is responsible for the technology, partner, and channel strategy. This includes driving strategy and technology integration. David has been pushing for the move from CI to CD for several years. All yours, David.
Thanks, Andre. Hi, everyone. My name is Dave Sayers. As Andre said, I work with Midvision. And I'm a co-founder. We founded in 2008. I'm one of the directors. And I've worked in deployment automation for probably over 10 years. And we really started Midvision in 2008 because, at least at the time, there wasn't any products out there to kind of automate the release process. So we were one of, I think, many firms that were created around that time. I do have a background of working in large organizations, as does our business. I do a number of things on a day-to-day basis, but really I'm a toolsmith at heart. So I want to talk to you a little bit about I think really about what we're seeing in the industry, what we see as the prominent trends and some of the best practices. Before I get started, just a little bit about our company. So we really work with large organizations that are trying to manage data centers at scale. And we're one of a handful of corporate vendors out there that do this. And we are taking some of the kind of principles that the cool kids on the block, Netflix and Twitters and things, and looking to apply them to more traditional organizations. We work closely with CloudBees. We have some integrations from Jenkins, and we're really kind of trying to provide some of that capability to move from CI to CD, but with a particular focus on automation. One of the things that we do well, I think, is to be able to stand up environments completely for PaaS, service catalog, those types of things. Okay, enough of that. So what I want to talk to you about today really is, firstly, I've just got a couple of slides about just positioning kind of the relationship between automation, continuous delivery, and DevOps. And then the meat of the presentation I want to talk about is really around some of the best practices in release automation. I don't think you can talk about that without talking about desired state. And then there's kind of, I'll talk a little bit in the presentation about some of the different deployment models and how that affects things like packaging and versioning. But they're broadly split into two kind of areas, really. And what I'm talking about particularly today is around what's called directed deployment approach, which is a kind of an orchestration tier. Your Puppet and Chef uses a bit more of a kind of a convergent approach where you've got servers and agents that are polling back. Hopefully that will come clear through the talk. And then I want to talk a little bit about how we use deployment models and do a little bit of a mention of toolchain integrations as well. Okay, so so there's obviously a lot of talk about DevOps and CD and things. I just want to give you my quick take on it before we get started. So, DevOps is a philosophy. It's everyone hugging each other and we're all working together for common good. And then continuous delivery sits below that, and that's really probably the most prevalent sort of practice. It's a process that's here. There are tools that aid that, but I don't think it's not a tool. It's not a thing. I think the analogy that I use when talking about continuous delivery is just in time in retail, right? So, if you think about just in time, we need to link the supply chain and, what farmers are growing to what's in our, warehouse, to the vans that are delivering them to the store, to what's selling well, to the feedback loops from how customers are consuming things. And this is what we're trying to do. And I think that if you look at the effect of just in time on retail, it's profound, right? The number of products in stores at Tesco's has increased from 2,500 to 4,000, right? They're able to to market and sell and distribute much more effectively. I think there's a lot of analogous points with continuous delivery, small batch and all of these types of things. And then below the kind of process of continuous delivery, then there's a number of kind of tools that, the conveyor belts and the machines and that put all of these things together. And today, I'm particularly talking about the release component of that. So this is a kind of a visual representation of the piece that I'm focusing on. So I think, more and more people are, this is very much a journey, right? A journey to continuous delivery, and people are kind of, choosing and picking particular things that they want to do, and to a kind of a nirvana of being able to have, deploy and destroy for test environments, elastic capacity for production systems, all of those types of things. And I think in terms of just talking about some of the how some of these pieces fit together. So I think at the bottom of this diagram here, we've got the kind of image provisioning, right? So that's your EC2 and OpenStack, VMware, those types of things. And then on top of that, is how we configure in those operating systems and runtimes, kernel settings, storage, network disk, all of those types of things. So I'm not covering any of that. There's a talk from Puppet Labs on infrastructure automation as well after us. And then on top of that, we've got this concept of being able to deploy our apps, and then also the dependencies that come with our apps, so the configuration. So when we deploy an EJB or a jar or a .NET component, is how do we configuration manage and deploy those pieces that we need to deploy our business application. So that's kind of the main piece that I'm talking about. And then on top of that, we've got this kind of continuous delivery release pipeline component, which is really around the process and governance, the approvals. Has it been into dev before it goes to QA? Is there a ticket that says that it can be released to production, and those types of things. So that's the kind of release management aspect of it. So that's kind of my view of the demarcation and what I'm going to try and talk about today. Okay, so some of the core principles that I want to draw out around deployment automation are number one, at the top of the list is version control, right? So we need to be version controlling everything. I think that this is much more accepted now than it ever was. Although I still don't think it's still got to the same level as what it is in the development world. We were talking over lunch, and I was talking to someone and saying, if you were a developer and you said, I've logged on to the production server, unjarred an EJB, updated an XML document, and deleted a CSS, and fixed the production system, right? Then you get sacked, right? If you do the same thing in operations, you probably get a pat on the back. Brilliant, he's fixed it, right? And I don't think that we have the same concept in operations around saying everything must be version controlled. We must, package it, we must promote it, install it, in the same way we do code. And then that brings me to the kind of next point is that one of the processes that I really like to promote today is the concept of building configuration, right? So we don't just have a main latest concept of configuration. We're not just putting stuff in version control and ensuring it sits there, but we have versions of that. So future state, current state, past state, etc. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And then in terms of the configuration change, we want to introduce that, deploy that, release that in the same way as we do code, right? And this is the concept of infrastructure as code, that we're codifying what our infrastructure looks like, and writing it to source control and releasing it in the same way. And we want to be able to link both configuration and application releases together. And it's together, they're the things that make the business application, right? No one is interested, the business is not interested to say that you've got some DDL deployed, or there's a jar there, or a war, or something. It's the whole picture, right? And that's what I think that the industry is moving towards, that concept of saying we want to deploy an app, and then we want the things to cascade off of that, our dependencies. So we really want to be able to associate those things together. And then I think this final point is something, again, that a lot of these principles have come across from the development world, but this is something that's very much stolen from the development world, and that is the concept of build once, deploy anywhere, right? So again, a developer, in the development world, it's not acceptable to say, I've given you 5 different files to deploy to each of the different environments between dev and production, right? You say, no, we want an archive, a package, some code, and then we want to, if there are any differences between those, we need to be able to do those, realize those at release time. And that's exactly what all of the vendors, all of the tooling, commercial open source is saying. We're using the same process over and over again. We're validating, testing the process so that when it breaks early, like in development, in the same way as we want our code to break early, right? And we don't want it to break in production. So we're testing and validating the process, and it's the same process. And the way we use the same process is by using what are called models, right? So a deployment model is a set of configuration for a logical unit of automation, right? So when we've got a business application, we might have, several tiers of it. We've got a database component, an application tier, some messaging, and then we're going to have a logical set of configuration that sits associated with each of those. So my database will have some tables and views, maybe some reference data, and my middleware has got some clusters and some JVMs or whatever. So we want to be able to define what are both the similarities between all of our environments, because this is one of the sort of simple things, really. It's ironic that so many problems and outages are due to the fact that things are different between different target environments. We want our models to be able to reflect what's similar in each environment, and then also what's different, right? So we might, if we've got 200 or 300 configuration items for a particular business application, we've got queues and topics and channels and web services and all of these types of things, Oracle drivers, paths, system properties. We want to be able to define all of those things and say they're the consistent set and these are the deltas. And there should just be a small subset, passwords, encryption types, keys, things like that. And then I would also suggest that, and again, this is probably, I think this is some industry theory behind this, is that we want to try, where possible, to have a complete set of configuration for a target technology, right? And what I mean by that is that we don't deploy deltas on their own. In the same way that if you're a Java developer and you've got an EAR file, right? You have an EAR file and it's got wars and jars and EJBs and stuff in there, and you don't just deploy a bit of it, you put it together and you deploy it, right? So we've got an encapsulated version of that. And the way we do that in a deployment automation sense, or the kind of, let's say, the thought around this is this concept of idempotency, right? So from a release perspective, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to always bring a target system to a known state, which is what idempotency allows you to do. So if I deploy, let's say, version 5 of a particular deployment, right? It could have some database components, some, as I say, across the stack. This is a principle, and a lot of the automation tools are implemented to use this. So I deploy version 5 to a new system, and it will apply changes 1 through 5, right? It'll apply them, and it brings them to a certain state. Then I deploy version 6, where it knows that up to 5 has been deployed, and it'll only deploy the delta, right? So this is kind of introducing a kind of almost like a dependency management thing that that developers are more familiar with to say, well, that into the release process. Now then, if I deploy version 6 to a new system, well, it knows nothing's been deployed on there before, right? So it deploys all 6. If I try and deploy 6 again onto the same system, it does nothing because it knows it's at version 6, right? So this is the concept of idempotency, and one that's, I think, is what you really should be trying to achieve in the sort of in the automation process. Okay, so let's have a look at the templates. So this concept of templates here, right? So I've got some RabbitMQ configuration here or something, right? So I've got on the right, I've got a template, which is a set of commands. I think there's a separate debate as to how you generate templates, and there are tools that allow you to connect via JMX to runtime containers and pull them out, or import DDL from a database, or just generate them in a command language or something, right? But we've got a template, and this is this is a set of processes that we want to be able to run in many environments, right? And then on the left-hand side here, we've got our dev test 01 set of values that we want to implement in our development 01 environment or development test 01 environment. Now, when I create that environment, at deploy time, I'm doing a simple substitution of the variables, so it's a data-driven concept. Now, if I want to create another environment, then I just need another set of values, right? So again, my system test 01 is going to create an environment by running the commands within the template, within the model, and then assert some new variables. If I want to update any of those environments, then again, I'm using my tooling to do that, or Eclipse, or whatever it is, or check it in and out. I'm updating that, so I update the template, and then I need to update the variables associated with it. And again, these have got versions in exactly the same way, branches, streams, in source control. We're packaging them as you would code. So this brings us to some thoughts around packaging. So in this diagram is meant to represent a source control system. So we're using GitHub or something, right? And we've got our uncompiled source here from a business application at the top. And then from an infrastructure perspective, we've got our desired state, right? What we want our runtimes to look like. And then one of the things that we promote when we're trying to do deploy business applications with their dependencies is associate them together in source control, right? So apply a baseline or a label across the repositories that you're using. And then in this case, we're also then going to create a package, a deployment archive. So this is a collection of things that we want to deploy, the rules on how to deploy, as well as the code or dependencies that we want to deploy. And then in this case, I'm associating, again, so I'll be using Jenkins to do this, associate my baseline, label, I'd be inserting that in my manifest on my build, I'm using it as the label within the file itself, and then I'm driving that through any release process as the tag or the label I want to deploy. And if you use this, certainly for any kind of JE compliant containers, if you use this implementation version in your manifest, so from your baseline, I don't know if any of you do this or not, then when a container starts, it spits that out. So it's a really good way of associating your runtime configuration with a baseline. And then if you're using that as a deploy tag as well, then you're really seeing, what each of the runtimes are, who deployed them, what changes are in each of the packages as well. So it's just a really simple way of tracking that. Okay, so and then from a deploy perspective, we are again, this is industry standard stuff really, that we're saying that our deployment server is right into our source control system. We've got integrations via everyone's standardized on REST, right? So we're speaking to Jenkins in and out, whatever. Actually we've got some into Jenkins via JMX, but Jenkins back to us via REST, and then. We're picking up artifacts from Nexus or Artifactory or whatever it is, again, on these kind of, Maven-based DSLs. And then pushing out to our deployment systems. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about then this concept of desired state and directed deployment, and just kind of differentiate a little bit between directed and convergent. So this is an example here where, well, look, I'm actually, this is someone actively clicking a deploy in an environment, but it could very well be, a post-build step in Jenkins. We've just done a build, we've done some unit tests or whatever. We've got a post-build step that's going to fire off a deploy, right? And there's, plenty of, Jenkins plugins out there to take these forward. And then, again, we have the concept of a kind of demarcation of roles and responsibilities as well. I'd say, again, this is something that's prevalent across the industry. We're wanting to be able to let the right people who need to be able to release and deploy from a release management perspective actually do that, right? And remove it away from the technicians and technical staff. So we might have a domain expert that's configuring our RabbitMQ, but they have nothing to do with the release process, right? So in this case, I've got a version of that I'm going to release here of version 1.2.3, and then I'm going to push that out to my Apache servers and some app servers and some Q technologies, right? And then that's got some code and some configuration together in a composite release in this time, right? And there's a whole, again, the same debates you'd have around code, around version lock-in and things like that as to how we want to release. We might want to do these separately or together, but we're fundamentally using the same logic. Put it in source control, version it, package it, have manifest, deploy it, promote it. And our desired state at version 1.2.3 is saying that we have 2 data centers online, 3-tier architecture for this particular business application. So in this example, let's say, we bring on 2 new data centers, Asia Pacific and, South America or something, right? Whatever it is. So then we change our desired state for this particular business application that we're deploying. And then, in this case, in this model that I'm promoting, then we using a directed deployment approach, we push out a new set of changes, right? And now a convergent approach would pull it, and we're directing it, and we've got an orchestration tier, and again, I'm using this term widely from an industry perspective, to be able to say, do some stuff on some web servers or some load balancers, do some stuff on some middleware, then do some stuff on a back end, right? And that's how the direction and the push and that orchestration tier generally works. So then I'm going to push my deployment changes out to my existing infrastructure. And again, this concept of idempotency is saying that I'm going to validate the infrastructure that exists that's already been deployed. So I'm going to check that it looks as it should, as the desired state should. So I'm validating that from my source control. If there's any deviation from that, I should update it, right? So if someone's logged in and changed the heap size or done something on a runtime or whatever else, right, I'm going to change that back to what it should be. But if it hasn't been updated, I don't need to do anything. But on this new infrastructure, on this new data center, then I'm standing that up, right? I'm in my Apache server, I'm, deploying my HTTPD, putting my SSL certs out, static content, whatever it is, right? And doing that for each of my tiers. Okay, so then the release process then on the ops side of the fence is, so we kind of just looked a bit of the development tooling and really, again, from a, probably predominantly a development audience, that this is all familiar in what you're doing with your own software development. And then on the right, as part of a release process, then again, the release tooling from an industry perspective is allowing the tools to integrate with each other, again, predominantly via REST, but by the use of plugins and interfaces to be able to, validate tickets in service management or to, make calls to disable monitoring. And pulling those kind of ops tools together in a more seamless way. So, in terms of then how I'm suggesting that we release change into the model for releasing change to infrastructure environments is really just exactly the same way as the developers are familiar with. So whenever I want to make a change to a RabbitMQ configuration, I'm changing that in source control, right? And then I'm building a version of that, and then I'm deploying a version of that, right? I want to make some Python change somewhere, so up to updating a JMS configuration somewhere, JBoss or WebLogic or whatever it is, right? I'm building it into a version, and then I'm going to deploy that. Again, my database update, I build it and I deploy it, right? And that's this is, I think it's a very simple concept, but it's, I think, one that's quite, relatively new, right, in the last few years onto how infrastructure should be managed. And it's allowing us to have all of those things that we expect from a development world. We're able to say, what Scrum was used for this particular change, who checked that file out, and what ticket was it associated to, and for that particular view to be created, or whatever it is, right? So we've got the who created it, that can be related to another business process, and then we've got who's released it as well, right? And then who's, what environments has it been in, how's it been promoted, and all of those types of things, but very much applied to to how our infrastructure is managed. So then, not only does that process can then it be applied to actually configuration management, right? How we manage our deltas over time, right? We talked about the concept of idempotency and saying, well, we need to be able to, put changes on top and layer them on top as our infrastructure is being provisioned. But what it allows us to do is it allows us to stand up infrastructure very quickly. So from a service catalogue or a PaaS perspective, we can say, I think when this traditional view of standing up some infrastructure everyone will be familiar with, right? We want Red Hat 6, Update 5, we want, JBoss 6.2, whatever, right? We all kind of get that we're asking that. But what I'm saying is that we should be trying to move towards a world where we're saying, and I want web config 56, right? I want my JBoss config 87, and I want my MQ, RabbitMQ config of 32, right? And, perhaps in this example, what I'm doing is building out a like production environment to recreate, a defect or something, right? I'm going to put some load through it and see if we can fix it. And then on top of that, I'm going to deploy version 124 of my actual business application. And I think that, again, the part on the left people are familiar with, and then the concept of deploying, a version of the business application on top, people are generally comfortable with. But what I'm saying is that we should be doing that for each of the layers that we're laying on top of the infrastructure that we provision. And then, just to wrap up, what I was looking at, through those processes, codifying our infrastructure, putting it in source control, packaging it, versioning it. We're all really looking about, one particular environment, right? That's the deploy. That process that we were looking at might have many different servers or components in it, but that's how we deploy to a single environment. And then what we're trying to show here is that then we're promoting those same packages with code and configuration and the actual steps that we use, that we're promoting those through the environments, and that some of them are going to fail early, and then hopefully we're going to get further and further, and then eventually they're going to get through to production. And then we've not only tested the actual code on the path, but we've also tested the release and the automation process itself. And I think that brings me to the end of what I wanted to say today. So I think we've got a break now, Andre, is that right?
You want to take any questions?
Yeah.
You mentioned that bit of deltas for the code, yes. Does that mean the code needs to be in a certain format, certain specification? Deltas need to mark up in certain versions of code?
So I think that the question was, how do we deploy deltas and with this kind of idempotent concept, and I think that there isn't a silver bullet for that, if I'm honest, and the different tools and different technologies implement it slightly differently. Broadly speaking, I think that where it's more simply applied to just copy a binary or something over the top, then most people are choosing not to do anything more complex than that, right? So an EAR file or something, right? Just push a new one out. Doesn't really matter that there was parts of it there that existed before that haven't changed. And then I think in more complex constructs like database deployments, then we're having to keep like an epoch, really, right? So a list of things that's happened. So we're tracking state to say, 1 to 5 has been deployed, and that state is being tracked around the target system. So one of the ways that we've tried to do that is to do it either within the tooling or to use something like Maven. So again, where you've used Maven, where you've got POM and you've got versions and you've got dependencies and things like that, and then that exists on your on your laptop, right? So from your Eclipse version, every time yours is going to look slightly different than someone else, and when you do an update, you're only going to get certain things, right? The new Log4j jar or something, because you've got the rest of it there, right? So again, from an industry perspective, you know, we're trying to use some of those, leverage some of the development stuff using things like IOC and version of control to be able to do that as well. But there isn't a one simple way. But that's kind of some of the thought around that.
Okay, thank you, David.
Okay.
Take care.